Welcome to Unit 1, Anatomy and Physiology. Logically enough, it's divided into two parts, anatomy and physiology. Part 1 is anatomy. Anatomy is the study of structure. A convenient way to study anatomy is in terms of levels of organization, from biggest to smallest. As we go through this, you'll see some of the terms and phrases are familiar to you, and some are not. Let's look, first of all, at the biggest level, the organism. That's the human being. Organisms contain organ systems. You're familiar with these: stomach, digestive system, urinary system, and so forth. The organ systems, in turn, are composed of organs like stomach, liver, brain, and the organs then contain tissues. Tissues contain cells, and cells are filled with their own tiny organs called organelles, which are made of molecules. And molecules, in turn, are made of atoms. So we'll look at each of these levels and provide some details about them. Beginning with the organism level, we need to understand a little more about the structure of an animal. To describe animal structure, you have to be familiar with the basic design, and we have to understand specific terms that relate to such things as the limbs, surface anatomy, directions and planes, and internal design. The anatomical position is the starting position of the body. In this case, the upper limbs, the arms, are at the side, and the palms are facing forward. Here is the basic design. It's a tube within a tube. Now, this is a design that we won't explain completely at this time. This is an introduction to it. We'll come back to it many times throughout the early parts of this course. The somatic component is the so-called outer tube. Generally, it deals with conscious activities and voluntary activities. It includes the body wall, the head, the limbs. The visceral component is the inner tube. And of course, it doesn't look quite like a simple outer and inner tube. Generally, the visceral component deals with unconscious and involuntary activities. It includes the internal organs of the body. The seemingly simple concepts of visceral and somatic actually are very complex. And as I mentioned, we'll build on them as we progress through the course. This is a view of an undissected rat specimen. You see the somatic component, the outer tube, the body wall, the limbs, the head. If you open up the specimen and look inside, now you're looking at the internal organs, the intestines, the stomach, the liver. These comprise the inner tube, the visceral component of the specimen. The limbs, we refer to them as arms and legs. What we call arms are really the upper limbs, and they're divided into two parts. The arm, or upper arm, that's the upper limb from shoulder to elbow, and the forearm, from elbow to hand. The legs are the lower limbs, divided into thigh, from hip to knee, and leg, from knee to foot. So we have to be a little careful when we use these terms. Let's look at the terms related to the regions of surface anatomy. The head, for example. The occipital is the backside of the head. Orbital refers to the eye. Buccal refers to the mouth. The trunk includes the cervical region, the neck, thoracic, the chest, abdominal, the body trunk, umbilical, the navel region, flank, the lateral surface of the body trunk. Lumbar is the lower back, and groin, the point where the thigh meets the body trunk. Pubic refers to the genital area. The upper limb includes the deltoid, the curve of the shoulder, scapula, the shoulder blade, axillary, the armpit, brachial, the arm, and cubital, the anterior surface of the elbow. The lower limb includes the gluteal region, the buttocks, the femoral region, the thigh. Popliteal is the knee. Calf is the posterior surface of the leg. Regarding surface anatomy, let's look at the abdomen. In this view, we can divide the abdomen into 4 quadrants: an upper right quadrant, an upper left quadrant, a lower right quadrant, and a lower left quadrant. Another way to do it is to divide it into 9 regions. In the middle would be the umbilical region. Above that would be the epigastric, literally above stomach, and below it the hypogastric, below stomach. On either side would be the right and left lumbar regions. Then in the corners would be the right and left hypochondriac region and the right and left iliac region. Now you may wonder, why do we call a person who complains of sickness all the time a hypochondriac? Well, the reason is the spleen is located roughly in the left hypochondriac region. And once upon a time, they thought the spleen was the seat of emotions and feelings and illness. And so they said that a person who complained of an illness was a hypochondriac. How about directions and planes? Well, here's an animal. Anterior is the front, posterior is the back, dorsal is the back side, and ventral the belly side. If we stand the animal up on 2 legs, though, it gets a little confusing because now ventral is also the front, anterior. Dorsal is also the back, posterior. So we need a new term for toward the head, and we'll use superior, cranial, or cephalad. Also, we need a new set of terms for toward the rear end. We use inferior or caudal. If we slice the specimen into a front and back half, this is called a frontal plane. A couple of terms apply to the limbs. Proximal means the part of the limb closer to the main part of the body, and distal means the part of the limb more distant, further away. If we look at the front view of the specimen, the sagittal plane separates the specimen into a right and left half. If it's in the middle, it's a mid-sagittal plane. A horizontal or transverse plane separates the specimen into an upper and lower part. The term medial refers to closer to the midline, and lateral further away from the midline. Let's continue with the internal design. Let's add a cavity. Actually, there are 2 major cavities. One is the thoracic cavity in the chest and the abdominopelvic cavity in the abdomen. I usually simply refer to this as the abdominal cavity. Now add some organ systems: the respiratory system, the digestive system, a urinary system, and a reproductive system. The body wall is referred to as parietal. The internal organs are referred to as visceral, the visceral organs. The location in the cavity enables them to move about as they function, and it allows room for growth. Continuing with internal design, let's look at membranes. Mucous membranes are the inner linings of those organ systems that open to the outside of the body, including digestive system and the others in the list. The lips are an outfolding of the mucous membrane of the digestive system. Sheets of connective tissue called fascia are found within the body wall, limbs, and head. The fascia between the skin is superficial fascia, and the fascia among the muscles is deep fascia. Serous membranes are watery membranes, shown in red. They cover the outside of the internal organs, called visceral serosa. They line the inside of the body cavities, called parietal serosa. In the thoracic cavity, the membranes are the pleural membranes. In the abdominal cavity, the membranes are the peritoneal membranes. Therefore, in the thoracic cavity, visceral pleura covers the lungs, parietal pleura lines the cavity. In the abdominal cavity, visceral peritoneum covers the organs, and parietal peritoneum lines the cavity. The heart is covered by a visceral pericardium closely attached to the heart and surrounded by the parietal pericardium. This is a tough, loose sac surrounding the heart. The organism, remember, is composed of organ systems. We'll cover organ systems in detail later in the course. You're familiar with most of the organ systems. Organ systems are groups of organs which perform a broad related function, including the muscular system, the nervous system, the digestive system, the reproductive system. The last two, the endocrine and circulatory system, needs a little more detail at this point. Let's look, for example, at the endocrine system. We'll cover details of the endocrine system in Unit 14. The endocrine system functions in internal communication. It has 5 components: a stimulus that acts on a gland, the hormone, a signal molecule released from the gland that acts on a target. The target, in turn, does something, takes an action. We also need a little more background for the circulatory system. This is an internal transport system. We'll cover the details in Units 16, 17, 18, and 19. One component of the circulatory system is the cardiovascular system, consisting of heart and blood vessels. Notice that blood flows away from the heart toward the arteries. From the arteries, it flows into capillaries. From the capillaries, it flows through veins and back to the heart. The interstitial fluid is considered part of the overall circulatory system. These are the fluids outside of the cardiovascular and the lymphatic systems. They're found among the cells of the body. The interstitial fluid makes up the internal environment of the body. The external environment is the outside of the body. The lymphatic system is another component of the overall circulatory system. It functions to return fluids to the cardiovascular system. Organ systems are composed of organs. You're familiar with the organs such as stomach, liver, brain, and so forth. Organs carry out a more specific function of the organ system. Organs are composed of 2 or more tissues. It's convenient to think of 2 general types of organs. Hollow organs are muscular organs, such as stomach, blood vessels, esophagus, the trachea. The walls contain layers of smooth muscle, both circular and longitudinal. They often contain sphincters. It's a ring of muscle that can open and close and act as a valve. The solid organs are the liver and kidney and other similar organs. In the tissue level of organization, tissues are groups of cells that carry out similar functions. Histology is the study of tissues. There are 4 types of primary tissues: epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous. Don't confuse biological tissues with tissue paper. Tissues are not necessarily thin sheets of material. Epithelial tissue is quite cellular, and it's a sheet-like tissue covering internal and external surfaces of organs, tubes, and so forth, like the inside of the mouth the outside of the skin. Connective tissue may be in the form of sheets or it may be compact, and it's located inside or between organs. Connective tissue is not highly cellular. It does contain extensive fill-in material called matrix that includes fibers of protein, organic and inorganic material, especially minerals. Muscle tissue cells are called fibers. Muscle is involved in movement and includes three types. Skeletal muscle, these are muscles attached to the skeleton. They're voluntary, and they comprise the somatic part of the body. Cardiac muscle is found in the heart. Smooth muscle is tissue located in the walls of the internal organs, including the blood vessels. The major characteristic of the visceral part of the body is the presence of smooth muscle. Blood vessels and other structures containing smooth muscle may be located in the body wall and limbs, so the visceral component is also found in the so-called outer tube. As you will see, smooth muscle is extremely important in the functioning of the human body. Nervous tissue is located within the nervous system, and it's involved in internal communication. There are two types of cells in the nervous system: neurons or nerve cells, which include a cell body containing all the usual cell organelles, and cell processes, which are extensions from the cell body. They include axons, which conduct nerve impulses, and dendrites, which receive and generate nerve impulses. The other types of cells in the nervous system are the glial cells, and these are supporting cells. Continuing down our levels of organization, we come to cells. Cells are surrounded by a plasma membrane. They're filled with a semi-jelly-like material called cytoplasm or cytosol, and they contain a nucleus. In addition to that, they're filled with tiny organs called organelles. Surrounding the cell is an extracellular fluid. All living cells are in contact with the fluid. Extracellular fluid includes interstitial fluid, blood, and many other fluids. Notice that interstitial fluid is not quite the same as extracellular fluid. It's the major type. Cells, in turn, are composed of tiny organs. These organs, called organelles, are made of molecules, and the molecules are composed of atoms. And so you see we have progressed down the levels of organization from largest to smallest. Part B, Physiology. What is physiology? Physiology is the study of function. Function involves many things: control systems, regulation of activities, etc. An important feature is homeostasis, the maintenance of stable internal conditions, such as temperature, oxygen levels, glucose concentration. If a condition changes, homeostasis will restore the condition to normal. To describe control systems, an increase in something is indicated with an up arrow and a decrease with a down arrow. Control systems tend to function like a volume control that can be turned up or down rather than on or off. Both arrows are used to represent the changes in this manner. Notice the up arrow and in parentheses the down arrow. This example will illustrate a control system. First arrow shows the results due to a decrease in metabolism. Within the parentheses is the second arrow showing the opposite condition, an increase in metabolism. We could separate this into two charts. The arrow in front of parentheses go together, so the increase in metabolism leads to an increase in hypothalamic activity and an increase in TRH secretion, and so forth. On the other hand, the opposite condition, that's the one shown in parentheses, an increase in metabolism would lead to a decrease in hypothalamic activity, a decrease in TRH secretion, and so forth. So if we look at the combined charts, the arrows in front of the parentheses correspond to one another, and the arrows within the parentheses correspond to one another. Control systems are generally continuously active. By turning the system up or down rather than on or off, it can be precisely regulated. Let's look at a bathtub analogy. If you want 6 inches of water in a tub, you can put the plug in, turn on the water, and fill the tub to 6 inches. Then turn off the water. Living systems don't work this way because it is not easily controlled. Instead, leave the plug out. Turn on the water so that it runs in faster than it runs out. When the water level reaches 6 inches, adjust the inflow to equal the outflow. This is more like a living system because the water level can be controlled by regulating the inflow and the outflow. To change the water level, increase or decrease the inflow, that is the input, or the outflow, that is the output. The system is continuously active. It requires a sensor. It contains a control center. For example, the entire body might be the system with a sensor, often a receptor in the nervous system. Control center within the system, often the hypothalamus, part of the brain. Let's look at the general mechanism of homeostasis of a system. The goal is to maintain stable physical or chemical state. If something causes the state to deviate from normal, in response, the system will restore the state to normal. The initial change, which is stress or input, is any change in the physical or chemical state, such as an increase or decrease in temperature, oxygen levels, and glucose concentration. The response change, that is the output, reverses the input to restore the physical or chemical state of the system to normal. It's opposite the initial change. Homeostasis involves negative or corrective feedback, in which the response change is opposite to the initial change. Part of the output becomes input. It returns the activity of a system to normal. It counteracts the stress. Negative feedback is very common in living systems. Positive feedback is not homeostasis, even though the word positive sounds better than negative. Positive feedback is rare in living things. In this case, the response change is the same as the initial change. It intensifies the stress. As I said, it is rare in living systems. A common example, however, is childbirth. As the uterus constricts, constriction stimulates further contraction of the uterus to give birth to the baby. Let's use furnace in your house as an example. It's wintertime. You set your thermostat to, let's say, 70 degrees. Is the output of your furnace constant? That is the temperature absolutely constant at 70 degrees? No, it increases and decreases continuously. It may rise to 71 when the furnace is on. It may drop to 69 when the furnace is off. The furnace produces heat. That's the physical or chemical state. The rise in temperature is sensed by the sensor, the thermostat, and it turns the furnace down. The furnace produces less heat. The temperature drops. The drop is then sensed by the thermostat to turn the furnace on once again and raise the temperature back up to where it was. In the human being, blood pressure regulation is another example. The direct effect would be constriction of blood vessels increases blood pressure. Now you'll understand this when we get to the cardiovascular system. Homeostasis, however, regulates the blood pressure. If blood pressure increases, negative feedback will restore it back to normal by dilating blood vessels. Have you ever wondered why the logs on a log truck are arranged as they are, with big ends piled near the cab and the small ends hanging out the back? Probably not. Why not arrange them neater by alternating the position? Or why not stack them with the big ends in back? Negative feedback. If one log begins to slip back, it becomes jammed tighter in among the logs. The more it slips, the tighter it gets jammed and the less it can slip further. If they were stacked the other way, when one of them began to slip back a little bit, remember, the truck is on a bumpy road jostling the logs. When one slips back a little bit, it becomes looser and it'll slip back further. And in a few moments, there's a pile of logs in the road. This is positive feedback. And now you are done with Unit 1, Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. You're ready to progress to the next unit, Unit 2, Model.